It's my pleasure to welcome you to the last panel of the day, a Fireside chat with the institute directors around the country, and to discuss what will the future bring to transportation research. It's my pleasure to introduce my friend and also colleague, Dr. Robert Hampshire. As of today, two days ago, becomes Executive Director of Research Development at the University of Minnesota. Dr. Hampshire is the former Chief Science Officer and Deputy Assistant Secretary for Research and Technology at the U.S. Department of Transportation. Robert was also one of us. He was a faculty member at the Ford School of Public Policy and also a research faculty at UMTRI. So I will let Robert to introduce his panel.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Very exciting. There we go. Yes. I'd like to actually invite all the panelists up, and please come take a seat, and I'll introduce you as you enter. I'd like to introduce Dan Sperling, the founding director for Institute for Transportation Studies at UC Davis. Zach Doerzaph, as the director at the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute. We also have Scott Moura from the California Berkeley Institute of Transportation Studies. And we have the Honorable Greg Winfree, the CEO and director of Texas Transportation Institute. I note honorable for Greg Winfree in that he was the Senate-confirmed leader of the office, from the Office of the Secretary at U.S. DOT, Office of Research and Technology, as the Assistant Secretary. Over the last 4 years, I had the privilege to attempt to fill partially his shoes in that role, which I found as an honor and a public service to this nation, and particularly to follow in footsteps such as Greg, and certainly everyone else on the, I'll embarrass you all later and with riches, but I just want to acknowledge the public service of Greg, Honorable Greg Winfree, but also everyone here on the dais, but also the pleasure I had in certainly representing, hopefully I did a good job representing UMTRI, University of Michigan, but more than that, the transportation research ecosystem across this nation. You know, and I'll get to the panel, but when we think about safety across all modes and how, the focus there, I think Renee mentioned it earlier, with still the 40,000 plus people who are dying on our roadways publicly, our public roadways, it's something to rally around and is a mission that is worthy. And it's a mission that our institutes play a key role in. And so I saw from my seat a unique role in the transportation research and innovation ecosystem that, one, universities play with our industry partners, but particularly institutes, our peer institutes to UMTRI, the roles that they play uniquely in furthering the transportation system and outcomes for people traveling public in this nation. And it is something to be commended. I saw it firsthand, the unique role that each of these institutes play in policy decision-making and operational management of systems, multimodal, be it air, rail, maritime, transit, and roadway. And it's very comprehensive, the impact that I saw from these institutions. So I'm excited today to moderate a conversation about where we're going to go next, and where we're going to, and what the future will be, hearing from the leadership of these esteemed institutions. I will take one more privilege before I sit down and ask questions. When we think it's an honor to be here for, again, UMTRI's 60th anniversary. I joined UMTRI in 2014. And really what stood out is not necessarily, what UMTRI was doing in the mission, and it hasn't come up yet, but I have to say it's the how. I've been in academic departments before I joined UMTRI, and the way UMTRI operates, how collegial it is, how respectful it is of everyone, regardless of job title. I see folks in many job titles here that really make the place work, and I think it's the how. And it's so important and heartwarming. I think so, as we talk about now moving to the future and what we've done for the next 60 years, it's my prayer that the spirit of how and how collegial and respectful and honestly a family that UMTRI has been to me, that it continues to be that for many people as we go forward. So I'll take my seat here and ask some questions. All right, a great pleasure to be here with the Institute directors. And these are really, we'll get into this. This panel really is focused on the future. And everyone's looking to leaders here to paint that vision for the future. But first, let me just ground it a little bit in some of the greatest hits, the contributions. We've heard some from UMTRI today about those groundbreaking contributions, the impact on society, impact on people in this nation or the environment in this nation and world. So I'm going to ask you all, what's a greatest hit or something that you want to make sure folks here know about the role your institute has played in making this nation great, and particularly around the traveling public? Maybe I'll start, Greg.
Sure. Thanks so much for that. Good afternoon, everyone. As we say in Anglo, howdy. I haven't heard anyone say howdy here in Michigan yet. I think it's fair to say, it was interesting, 2025 seems to be a year of anniversaries and celebrations. Personally, I had my 30th anniversary yesterday, but that's beside the point. But TTI, we had our 75th earlier in the summer, and of course we're here to celebrate UMTRI's 60th, and that tenure tells a tremendous story about the need and the impact of the research community on this industry that we're not only own, but we partake in. Of transportation. So what TTI is largely known for, and I think our greatest hits literally are hits into guardrails. It's roadside safety infrastructure. It's those devices that you're not meant to be seen. You're not supposed to see them. You're not supposed to know they're there, but they're there when you need them. And they're there to ensure that Americans get home to their families safely. So things like the guardrails you see on the roadway. If you look over history, what we have now are energy absorbing end caps that are designed to ameliorate a vehicle crash so that those occupants get home safely. Cable median barriers that prevent vehicles from going into oncoming traffic. These are the devices that worldwide save countless number of lives. But interestingly, most recently, we did, along with the University of Nebraska, did some testing of electrified vehicles into these roadside infrastructure that have passed the MASH standard, the Manual for Assessing Safety Hardware under AASHTO. And electrified vehicles, because of how they carry their weight and the increased weight, have penetrated the barriers with very little difficulty, like a hot knife through butter. So there are 1 million EVs in California. There's 250,000 in Florida, 230,000 in Texas, and on. So these are real world challenges on our roadways right now that the people in this room need to get their arms around so that we can continue to ensure that people get from point A to B as safely as possible. So I would say that's TTI's greatest hit, even though pavement materials through space, we try and cover the waterfront, literally. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. I'm sure there's so much, you could probably take multiple days to talk about the contributions at TTI, so thank you for giving a little highlight there. Scott.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Once again, my name's Scott Moura, and I'm here representing the University of California, Berkeley's Institute of Transportation Studies. First, I want to say what a delight it is to be here. The more important thing you should know about me is that I am a Michigan Wolverine. I received my PhD degree in mechanical engineering here. Go Blue. Much of my family actually is also very connected with this university, so few things bring me greater joy, honestly, than spending time here with family and friends, in fall in Ann Arbor. So thank you. So greatest hits at Berkeley ITS. Well, the punchline of this story is going to be Henry Liu is one of our greatest hits because he was a postdoc, at Berkeley ITS. But let's back up into that story. So the story is actually Berkeley ITS and the PATH program deployed the first self-driving automated vehicles on public roads in 1997, okay? 1997. Now, I was just looking up some information. Let me tell you something interesting that I had to share. So this was actually part of the Federal Highway National Automated Highway Program, right, that actually GM played a leadership in. And actually in the year 1992, okay, there was the Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act. And what it read was, the Secretary of Transportation shall develop, 1992, the Secretary of Transportation shall develop an automated highway and vehicle prototype from which fully automated intelligent vehicle highway systems can be developed. The goal of this program is to have the first fully automated roadway or an automated test track in operation by 1997. How many of you, this is 1992, how many of you were born after 1992? Yeah, okay. Yeah, incredible, right? So anyways, that happened at Berkeley ITS, again, before DARPA, Grand Challenge, and the Google automated vehicle. And with that came a whole generation of leaders. That includes Henry Liu, Yafeng Yang, who was a postdoc kind of in that era, and also the founder of M-City, the late and great and beloved Hui Peng. So I'll stop there.
Oh, that's a great story. Zach?
Yeah, sure. So for grounding at the high level, why does VTTI exist? We exist because we believe in a future with safer journeys, smarter systems, and mobility that serves us all. And we do that in a variety of ways. A lot of it is helping to deploy new features on vehicles. And you've probably heard of the Smart Roads, which is a great 730-acre, 14-lane-mile facility where we make a lot of those systems go from research into reality. That's been a huge focus of us. But when people ask, what has VTTI done? That's the real innovation. It's unquestionably the creation of the naturalistic driving method. So those who aren't familiar, this is turning the world really into our research laboratory by taking sophisticated and unobtrusive data collection systems, putting them in vehicles, and then doing absolutely nothing but monitoring and watching the way that people drive. It sounds simple, because today it's everywhere, but we've been doing this since the late 80s and into the early 90s when we duct tape VCR or camcorders onto cars and got really excited when we get 45 minutes of video. It was a pretty exciting time. So you fast forward into how that came to fruition. We can thank the Space Shuttle program. They invented this pretty neat thing called the PC-104 stack, which soon enabled the very first digital video collection of all time. And in the early 2000s, about 2001, the 100-car study got kicked off, which is a real seminal study. It was the first time that we could compare something like a police accident report to what actually happens. And it was extraordinarily eye-opening to realize that that well-meaning police officer who showed up on a scene, whose primary job is to clear the traffic, who is interviewing witnesses who may have something to hide, may not be there at all, doesn't result in the best, most reliable data to understand the nuances of how crashes manifest. And so we can fast forward through Sharp 2, which is now resulted in tens of millions of miles. We continue to have these vehicles on the road with latest advanced features, so we can understand not just how these engineers are developing them, well-intentioned inside of the analysis and design parts of the OEMs and tier 1 suppliers, but when they get out to the real world, how are they actually getting used? How are L2 systems actually being manipulated, and what are the implications and opportunities to improve them? So very excited about having created that method and seeing it continue to create value into the modern day.
Yeah, I mean, on that, Zach, just the new methodology of naturalistic driving data, like in the impact that that's had on so many people in this room, including myself. I had the opportunity to work on those data in the future, but what that allowed when it came to decision making, policy making, and design of vehicles is really a truly terrific contributions that VTTI has made. Dan?
Thank you. I want to add that it's also a great honor and great pleasure for me to be here to help UMTRI celebrate, but also to join my fellow directors here from across the country. My institute, Institute of Transportation Studies, I think is the youngest. You didn't say how old. 36. Got me beat by 1 year. And those guys, they're really old. They're institutes. I, on the other hand, am the senior guy here. So I founded my institute, the Institute of Transportation Studies at UC Davis, 35 years ago. And unlike most directors, I decided it was a fabulous job. I'm never leaving it. And so I really had a fabulous career enjoying that. So I'm in California, and the Institute at UC Davis, we focus much more on environmental issues, sustainability issues. And so I'm going to give you one example of that. But first, I want to give a different kind of big hit. And that is, about 25 years ago, we created a new interdisciplinary graduate program in transportation, technology, and policy. Now, that doesn't sound like such an innovation, but most of you know that is an innovation. You know, most transportation evolved out of civil engineering, and there's some out of planning. And so we decided we needed a whole new way of approaching it. Now, of course, we've all been talking about interdisciplinary all morning, but to actually institutionalize the training is a significant thing. So I say it because I encourage that others of you that have the opportunity to really create a true interdisciplinary programs in transportation. It's a great idea. Okay, and I would mention our first student actually ended up becoming head of NHTSA a number of years ago, David Friedman. So he was actually pioneered our program. One example of research is a number of years ago, actually in partnership with UC Berkeley, we designed, at the behest of the governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he asked us to come up with a new policy creation to deal with fuels. And we designed something that we called the Low Carbon Fuel Standard, and it was adopted essentially the way we proposed it. We had a team of about 20 professors and grad students and postdocs, and it was adopted by California, and it's been a huge success. In fact, today, 3/4 of all the diesel fuel in California is not fossil diesel. It's what we call renewable diesel fuel, made in an oil refinery and replacing all the fossil diesel, and that's being used around elsewhere. That was one outcome, but the policy itself was subsequently adopted by several states, Oregon, Washington, British Columbia, and then the whole country of Canada adopted it as well. They call it the Clean Fuel Standard, just to be a little less controversial, more politically correct, perhaps. And so that's had a huge impact. As I said, the diesel fuel is an example. It's incentivized electric vehicles and incentivized methane from dairy digesters, from farms. So it's had a very large effect. Thank you.
Dan, that's an understatement. Then we'll come back to Scott about the policy impact of the Institute at Davis. That policy is, think about implementation, the clean air. Air is cleaner that folks are breathing because of Dan and the Institute at Davis. And that's lives saved, that's quality adjusted life years gained because of the Institute and the work, Dan, and you certainly personally, but broadly in that Institute. And that, in addition, and we'll get to you, Scott, is the people. And this is probably across the board for all the institutes, be it the researchers, staff, students who either stay at your institutes, have moved on into other roles in state government, into companies that have really populated our transportation ecosystem. From the White House all the way to startup companies, the impact of these institutes when it comes to people is also immeasurable in many ways. Scott.
No, yeah, I was just going to add, yeah, Governor Gavin Newsom is at Climate Week mentioned a couple times Tesla wouldn't exist without policies California, which you might roll your eyes about, but quite concretely, financially, they would have had huge trouble existing if it weren't for the low carbon fuel standard policy.
Yeah, and that kind of allows me to transition to the next question when we think about people that, you know, these institutes have contributed to the world and impact on our transportation system is part of the public interest or public service mission of universities. And I think the institutes here sit at a very unique place within academia and within the broader industry with partners here today. But I think the institutes play a role that's unique between discovery and adoption of new technologies and policy. That sort of bridging role to get things into practice, you really have played a tremendous role. And sometimes that's from being like a trusted third-party data collector, or setting up some interoperability standards, or convening private sector partners. You know, so can you kind of give us some ways, reflect a little bit, if you have any good stories that you might want to share, that how you might see transportation research institutes leaning into this key role, this public interest mission of a convener or trusted third party in the next 10 years? May start with Scott.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so the question is, what is the role of these research institutes in our society and in this ecosystem, right? And you know, at the core, it's events like this. So let me break this down. This is how I think about it at Berkeley. Is our role as a university research institute is to create knowledge, educate leaders, and serve society. Those three things specifically. Now, as part of that, I think we are uniquely positioned in this ecosystem to do things that industry cannot and government cannot. So for example, you know, at our research institutes, this is where a lot of basic science and innovation and creativity is happening. Now, we can work on that and mature the technologies, but on the other end, we need industry to catch it, right? To absorb it and put their firepower behind it to really be able to deploy it at scale. Meanwhile, on the other side, you've got government, which is, you know, monitoring some of these technologies and thinking carefully, how do we encourage this? Or how do we regulate it in a way where we can protect against unintended negative consequences? And so, you know, for example, at ITS Berkeley, very often, some policymakers will come to us and say, hey, can you study this core issue so we can understand it better to put the proper policy in place? So it plays a very core part in this ecosystem that is, you know, unique from what government and university, private industry does. So I think that self-identity is incredibly important to understanding what will our future look like.
Yeah, I'll springboard off of that. I think you bring up great points. So I'm gonna read tea leaves a little bit of some trends that I'm seeing in that third-party space, the trusted broker, the sort of, it's a really amazing spot to be, right? We as university-affiliated organizations who in some ways are incentivized to act more like industry with soft-funded faculty that you all heard about earlier, puts us in this really amazing position where we get to be both altruistic and mission-driven simultaneously. And where I think that is exciting and where I see some of things heading is where the traditional higher education model is you get a great idea and it gets kind of close, and then we hope a startup company gets created, or we hope industry catches it. Where mature institutes are starting to really differentiate themselves is holding onto those ideas longer. And instead of getting it almost implementation and then rolling off, I see us holding it on to implementation. Now, it doesn't mean we're gonna, you know, deploy it across the world at full scale, but there's lots of examples. You know, to give you one, we're We're preparing to do a limited deployment of a automated truck-mounted attenuator. These are the vehicles with a big crash cushion on the back of it. They get hit hundreds of times a year. We have lots of fatalities, believe it or not, so we're putting humans into basically crash dummy kind of positions. It's a very easy automation problem compared to what, say, Torque Robotics is doing. I don't know if CJ's still here, because it's just you can put a car in front of it and set up a leader-follower architecture, so it's sort of within the safety case bounds of an institute. It's small market, which means it's not very profitable, but we can put it out there and save lives. What a great place for, again, mature institutes to be able to sort of fill that gap when there's not a great market opportunity, but there is a great opportunity for humankind. I think that's a really neat, forward-looking way that I think the trends are heading.
Well, that's a great example. I follow this attenuator work, and I didn't know anything about this, these vehicles that really are protecting roadway workers. This really is a barrier between you driving and hitting someone on the roadway, the vehicle that sort of follows the work zone, and how important that is. And maybe that's a great case for automation. You guys have done an amazing job developing that out. I don't know. Greg, you want to talk about the TTI's role?
Sure. One of the things that I found most attractive about transportation research, so if you look at all the letters after, I'm the dummy up here, I'm the lawyer, I'm not the PhD engineer, but I was attracted, and I've always been in technologically oriented organizations. I was litigation counsel for a copper company, and for a chemicals and plastics, and for pharma manufacturer, so all heavy on the sciences. So that's what attracted me to transportation. But the key thing, the thing that really struck me, was transportation research literally is at the juncture of discovery and implementation, much more so than any other part of the research enterprise. Not to denigrate what any of our fabulous researchers do from a basic and exploratory perspective, but what happens in transportation literally goes from ideation to implementation on a much shorter timetable. So part of what we need to do is better differentiate ourselves without denigrating our research colleagues, but making the point that what happens in these spaces immediately benefits the American traveling public. So that's one thing that's unique about this industry. One thing also that's a differentiator for land grant institutions like A&M and like Virginia Tech is that we've got a mission to educate and benefit society, whether it's in your state or broader, but that's a tremendous sense of mission. So the folks that work for us are mission oriented, which is quite a huge differentiator. So again, so coming from a land grant university perspective, where it's about applied research, where it's about implementation and seeing in real time the brilliance being implemented to save lives and to be more efficient and to create opportunities, that's what's really rewarding about being in this space. So thank you.
Dan?
Two thoughts I have. One, it follows up with what Scott started with, this idea of convening. And I think for institutes where we're gathering together groups of people on topics, this is something where we can play a really big role. And when I say convening, so when I mean convening, I mean bringing together different industry groups with government, local, state, national, international, and the NGOs, civil society, and bringing these people together, because all the things we've been talking about, they require, the big things, they're big transformations, and they require many different parties to participate: the regulators, the cities, the investments, the incentives, the infrastructure. And so that's something that we can do as independent organizations and entities that are science-based, data-based, evidence-based. So, we do a lot of, just like I don't know too much about what TTI and Virginia Tech do, but Berkeley and us, we do a lot of briefings of legislatures, government agencies. We do we convene at Davis, we convene a conference every 2 years. It's an invitation only, so it's like Traverse City, except it's invitation only and much more intended to ex-Traverse City, I found out. Sorry.
Sorry.
Which was a great concept for a long time. But it's bringing together people and making it by invitation. You're bringing together the leaders and experts. And I think the more that we can do of that, it's taking all that knowledge we're creating, but if we don't disseminate it and we don't interact with those, because we get feedback, you know? You do the briefings and they tell us, you know, why it won't work or why more data or more research is needed. One other big thing I want to mention is that I've become, and my institute has become, much more engaged internationally in the last 5 to 10 years. And I see that really important, and it's important because we're talking here about public interest. So our public interest is to learn from others, but it's also a global public interest to disseminate what we're doing here. And of course, all the things we're talking about, automated vehicles, electrification, new forms of transportation, all of this is global, is going global. There's lots to learn, and there's lots to disseminate. You know, we have centers now in Europe, India, China, and Africa. And so that's a kind of an encouragement I give to start expanding our horizons. We have a lot of expertise here that we can share, but there's a lot we can learn as well. Thank you.
Yeah, great.
I just wanted to jump on a point that Dan made, because I agree wholeheartedly about the power of convening. It's extraordinarily important for us to have these conversations, but I would submit we need to stop talking amongst ourselves. When I would go to ITS World Congress, to me it was a traveling circus. It was the same 5,000 people here, and then you got another venue, it's the same 5,000 people. We've got to start to talk more to the public so that they know what's coming, so that they can be prepared, so that they're aware and they're not afraid. We're all convinced of it in this room because we all know the experts working on these technologies, but I'll tell you, as a former product liability defense lawyer, what you deal with when these things get to courthouse, it ain't about the judge. The judge is the law person. It's the lay people in the jury that hear this, have preconceptions, misconceptions, and fears that if we don't get out in front, we can't control the narrative. And if we don't control the narrative, then the end point is self-explanatory, right? Because it's just going to crash and burn on the rocks. So I was just reflecting on the earlier slide where it said, is the story going to be self-driving saves 36,000, or is it going to be 4,000 people died? It's going to be 4,000 people died, and then the tagline is going to be, is your kid next, right? So we've got to figure out, we know how this works. We've got to do a better job of being deliberate about getting our messaging out, interacting with the public, peeling back the layers of mistrust about academia and smart people writ large, and getting these ideas out there.
No, that's really great. Terrific thing about communications, public engagement, and that's part of the role that basically all the institutes here have done, but doubling down on that is sort of where we are at this moment. You know, so far we've heard some of the greatest hits about how these institutes have really impacted the community and the nation. We heard that that's in the public interest. That's one thing we want to keep in mind as we work with industry, also in government. These institutes within academia are working in the public interest, and that mission is sacred in many ways. But let me move to who pays for it. Okay, so let's talk money. But when you think about the $100 million that, we'll go back to the $100 million. I love Jim Wing. He said, that's not a joke, right? $100 million is probably the right inflation-adjusted number to make the impact that the original founder of UMTRI would have. But as we think about now in the fiscal environment that we're in, I would make a case that we're stronger together. You know, I saw in my role that, you know, the big vision often comes from multiple stakeholders, multiple teams working together across universities, industries, and others. But those are big visions and ultimately stronger together. So let me ask, and there's a history of institutes here working together. There's also some frenemy things. We know that everyone here is competing also, but also working together. So it's a really interesting ecosystem of competition, but also cooperation, right? And so as we think about the next 10 years, one, if you can reflect on any kind of meaningful collaboration that has happened amongst the institutions, but also what do you see as possible future opportunities for collaboration amongst transportation institutes, so the impact is bigger than the sum of the parts. And I see Zach's eyes kind of lighten up, so I'll start with Zach.
I twitch. That's what happens. Yeah, you get called if you move. I feel like I got to cheat, because without a doubt, I got to talk about the UTC program.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm going to use that as a catalyst, really, I think, to describe the opportunity going forward. But the UTC program has been an incredible, probably initiator of multiple of us up here. I know for VTTI, we exist because of the UTC program. That was the spark that eventually lit the flame that led to the institute being created. We've had a number of these over the year. I got to give a shout out to my colleagues at TTI. We had a great national center in the last round that I believe we did some really groundbreaking work with, and helped to show what happens when you have an opportunity to really work together as a team towards the same goal. And Paul Green and I were just talking a minute ago, so I'll jam off of that conversation, which was sort of imagine if we could find the incentives in order to peel away the competition between institutes and researchers and really focus on the 5 or 6 or 10 year in the future goal and become highly mission driven and stop pretending like we're direct competitors. Because at the end of the day, we may have some shared capabilities, but we also have more unique and assets between humans and resources and test environments that if we could use them all for the same mission that's a little further out there, it would be spectacular. I mean, this question of how safe is safe enough, we all talked about automated vehicles. There, I don't think, is any better set of experts who can convene the large ecosystem required to answer that question than the institutes could do. We just need to figure out what that model looks like and populate it with $100 million-ish. But perhaps it's incumbent on us. It's easy. I feel like that's the good old faculty member cop-out, right? Well, we just need the money, then we could do it. I think the call to action for all of us is to create the environment and ecosystem where the money comes to us instead of trying to wait for it. And it's not one source. It's the modern world. Resources are tighter than ever. But I bet we could figure it out if we work hard enough and show enough value and to spread that load far and wide enough to bring together community to make it happen.
Yeah, and Zach, let me push you on this. I think that's right. To give an example of what collaboration might be. I'm going to pin you down a little bit. So what's something that you think you have a good sense of what's emerging? What are the kind of things that could be the stronger together? Now look to Dan, and I'll push him on something specific that we might do together.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, I think we have some examples that probably got this sort of thing started. You go back a little bit, you can talk about Sharp 2 because that did involve a lot. Now, granted, it also had the largest investment from the National Academies ever. Yeah, that's kind of helpful, isn't it? So money's in there somewhere. But we can talk about other examples. So we have a group that's not particularly well advertised called the Automated Mobility Partnership, and it's ebbed and flowed over its 6-ish years of existence, but that is about 10 to 11 vehicle manufacturers and suppliers who came together with a single desire to accelerate the timeline towards developing and deploying automated technologies. And it worked. I mean, they really made some used existing data to answer some really key questions that helped accelerate those timelines, even if it wasn't something we got to talk about a lot in the public. I think that's the sort of thing I'm talking about, a shared funding model. The sum's greater than the whole of its parts. Did I get that right? And everybody's putting in a little bit of money and getting a much greater benefit out. Those, I think, are unfortunately difficult to create in a public-private partnership because we love to chuck RFPs over the fence and we love to throw our responses back, and that's just, in my candid opinion, the wrong way to fund this kind of thing. We should all be around the table creating the goals and missions together and then doing it as a team instead of this traditional model.
Oh, fantastic. I love that. Love hearing that. Dan, anything to add?
Okay, so I have a big idea, but a little piece of it is something I started talking with Henry about, and that is, there's all this research on automated vehicle technology. By the way, I say automated, not autonomous, and I don't know if you all know, but the word, first of all, autonomous is an abomination of the English language in this case. Number two, it was created by Google when they did their car in 2009. And it was that Silicon Valley thinking that, move fast and break things. It was part of that mentality that forget about the rest of the world, we're going to develop our technology, and it's going to, we don't need anyone else, and it's going to take over the world. And that's why they use the word autonomous. So I've continued to use automated instead. But in any case, so part of this is when we talk about the public interest with automated vehicles is, are they going to be privately owned? Are they going to serve a single passenger? Or are they going to be true shared services serving multiple people, and not just as cars, but it can be small buses as well. And so there's all that expertise here on technology. We have a lot of expertise on the behavioral side. So we're talking, I hope something comes out of it. But the bigger picture on this that I think is the big vision is we've created a transportation system that marginalizes a large part of our population. And there's people that, because of economics, don't have access to a reliable car. There's people that have physical limitations. There's, even if you have a car, you have a household, maybe you have 2 people, 2 adults, and there's 1 car. I mean, people are marginalized. Sometimes that car is an old one, not reliable. So there's a large part of our population. And now we're starting to develop the technologies and tools that can really can redefine public transportation. So part of it is, I brought up the automated vehicles that are pooled and shared, that can bring down the cost of public transportation. We can redefine public transportation to be much more intermodal, with electric bikes and scooters and active transportation. So there's a lot of opportunity here. And to me, as a public imperative, a public good, this is like as good as it gets.
Yeah. And let me just ask the audience here, please get questions ready. We're going to come to the Q&A here in a second. But I want to get Greg's perspective on this stronger together. I think you probably have the history about institute collaboration, but a competition collaboration, I think it all mixes together, but together, stronger together as we move forward. Do you have a vision of that, or what's your perspective on that, tackling future challenges?
No, that's a great question. I actually have some inside baseball history. So if y'all remember Safety Lou legislation, it was originally for the University Transportation Center program, a tranche of funding. Schools got the funding. More often than not, it was from their legislator. All right, so the majority of the program was earmarked, 80% of it. But the problem was the schools that received those earmarked funds had no tie or any interest in picking up the phone if USDOT called. It was, what did X senator, what did X representative want? That's all that mattered. So when, in the 2011 timeframe, when the luster of earmarks went away, I was tasked with, as the chief counsel at the time of RETA, recalibrating the UTC program into a fully competitive program. And you talk about lonely times. The Office of General Counsel departed and left me and 1 other lawyer to get this figured out, because everyone knew we were going to have slings and arrows coming in our direction. So what we did was we took the program and made it fully competitive and used an NSF model, because we knew that's what university researchers resonated with. And that became the foundation of the UTC program that you have now, which is fully competitive, which sought consortia. It was the first time anyone sought consortia A consortia in the old model was, well, let me get 2 or 3 different groups from my university and we'll just keep the funding. No, we said we want a mix of universities, we want different size, we want diversity amongst the universities, whether it's regionally, whether it's size or student bodies. So we pushed that as well. And that's what really unlocked the ability for universities to have a mechanism that fostered cross-collaboration amongst institutions and really brought out the best of what the program could be. It was well received by Congress. I will be perfectly honest, when 80 schools in the first old program were shrunken down to 35, which meant 55 or so did not get funds, there were some very cold stares at the Cutsy dinner that following year, but it was understood that this was the path forward, and that became the model that really unlocked and took the competitiveness out of the university research writ large and looked more toward a consortium model. So I'm just thrilled at where we've come and where we've been and how it's been supported by Congress, and it's just gotten better over time.
No, that's a really good, thank you for the story and of how all this comes, and these things don't come together by accident, right? There's folks positioned and stakeholder groups that are like you all, Cutsy, and others that really help get that collaborative funding, to help build that collaborative vision. And that's kind of part of what we're talking about here, is that stronger together. And that's not letting anyone in the audience off the hook, because I'm going to come to you with questions, but our private sector partners, foundations, and others, state, local government, stronger together as we build that vision. And I think the leaders here, you've heard, you know them and their institutes by reputation, but you hear it here, the kind of vision to build that for the next 10 years.
And real quick, so
yeah.
tribal colleges and two-year colleges are now part of it as well.
As part of, yeah, thank you. Let me now open it up for any questions. And Scott, did you want to, let me make sure I don't leave you out on this stronger together notion.
Yeah, no problem while people are formulating questions. So when you talk about stronger together, the way I think about it is, how do we do big team science, okay? How do we achieve epic, impactful, ambitious outcomes, yeah? Okay, I'm gonna go back in history for a moment. How many of you seen the Oppenheimer film? Okay, so the Manhattan Project was the first instance of big team science, right? Where you had two physics professors from Berkeley, Oppenheimer and Lawrence, right? And General Leslie Groves, and they all brought these scientists together to achieve something, and we can all discuss the outcomes. But, stronger together, examples of that, like at ITS Berkeley, is, there's this famous Mega Vander test. It's the largest traffic experiment in history. That was with UC Berkeley, Vanderbilt University, Rutgers, General Motors, Toyota, Nissan, and they basically deployed these connected and automated vehicles along I-24 outside of Nashville, and with automation, with a small percentage, were able to suppress stop-and-go waves, okay? You can't do that alone. Oh, I should mention, maybe the most important partner was Tennessee DOT, who had all these cameras to basically measure and monitor everything. There's a short mention of tribal communities and colleges. We're on the precipice, hopefully, of launching a program we call Accelerate, Autonomous Cargo Carriers for Logistics in rural and tribal communities with Berkeley, but University of New Mexico, Oklahoma, Arizona, and it's really focused on how can we use the tool set of automation to make transportation infrastructure work better for rural and tribal communities who are perhaps underserved. Now, while we bring the technology expertise from Berkeley, you can't do that without the right community relationships with the University of New Mexico, Oklahoma, right? So that's how I see it, is how do we do big team epic science to have impactful outcomes? And we need to work together and complement.
I love that. And I saw a question, Gopi.
Yeah. Sorry, for full disclosure, I'm ex-Ford. Because based on my question, that comes up next.
Okay.
So when Elon Musk was asked about a question. It's like, hey, you say your automated vehicle is ready, but how come it all gets into all these accidents and other stuff? His answer was, my vehicles are ready, the roads are not, right? And what I wanted to say was like, okay, I don't sign into that. But if we are thinking about 10, 15 years ahead, and when we are thinking about automated vehicles, EVs, drones, whatever it is, right? The new type of transportation systems existing with all other systems coming in. If we are thinking about what that road system should look like, transportation system, not just road system, the whole thing should look like, is from you guys working in all various aspects of it, is there something that we are missing in the pieces that need to come in the future in a bigger way, right? Just openly, right? If you think of it as, if I have to redesign these roads, if these new things are going to be existing everywhere, would the roads be designed the way it is, or what should be the way, and how could we transform to that one? Sorry, it's a little bit broader question, but I do want to see your input.
Anybody want to take that on?
When I was at DOT, we used to always say you can't build your way out of our calamity. The more road lane miles you build, the more cars you get, and you have constant and consistent traffic. But what I would say is if we're looking honestly at where we are, knowing what's coming down the pike, it's a model, and it's been talked about, but I've been calling it 4D traffic management. And that means everything from sub-national airspace, 500 feet down, where drones are gonna be, advanced air mobility, everything else flying and buzzing around in there that has to somehow at some point get down to the surface level. So we need to deconflict that in the very near term before we even start entertaining these flying devices that are gonna have access to the ground level. So I'm just saying, just writ large, right off the top, 4D traffic management is something we need to get serious about.
Let's go to another question. Anyone? Question? Floor is open. And I appreciate the multimodal notion there, Greg. Hopefully we can do more, have more of that.
Right, and since I'm the maritime industry representative here, this is really for Daniel. Your talk about international. UN Decade of Action for Road Safety, is this on anybody's radar? It ends in, let's see, 2030, 50%.
I don't do road safety, so I don't know the answer to that. But I can talk about the IMO.
Yeah, okay.
No, thank you for that question. I know several folks are certainly tracking that. When I was at USDOT, that was, the global perspective is incredibly important in tracking that. It's something that certainly we were doing, but I'm not sure for others. Questions? I said stronger together, so I wasn't gonna let, everyone is part of that together, so I'm not gonna let you guys off the hook, the audience, for questions. So, Greg.
Hey there, Greg McGuire. I told you the Gregs are gonna get better as we go. Sorry, Greg Bruner. The question about transportation institutes internationally. Are there other models outside of the U.S. that are interesting to look at, that are different from the way that we've structured our federal industry academic partnerships? Is there, in Europe, China, other?
I think we're models. I mean, we're about as good as it gets around the world in terms of institutes and transportation. Certainly, some have national centers, like our DOE national labs. Europe has a few of those. But I think the universities in the United States, as a generalization, are extraordinary in terms of being more engaged, with public problems, with industry, other than on very, a lot of universities will do very basic, proprietary type research, developing some technology for a particular company. But I think our universities and our transportation centers in particular are really a model for the world. And so when I go around, they actually say to me, how do we get our universities to be like yours? How do we get our centers to be like yours? And I mean, that's part of what we're doing is capacity building elsewhere and helping them, think through how to do it and to collaborate with us and collaborate internationally. There's the international, IMO and the maritime, aviation, as well as automated vehicles, electric vehicles.
Anybody else?
Yeah, we've had, following that point from Dan, we've had a number of our ITS faculty, our engineering faculty, who quite literally have built engineering departments and programs in countries like Saudi Arabia and Vietnam and these places. So there's certainly an emulation, but I've been really amazed traveling abroad to learn from other countries and how they operate. I'll give one example. I feel maybe I should be careful because it's become sensitive, but I was once a co-PI at the Tsinghua Berkeley Shenzhen Institute, right? And what was very interesting about how they organized that is, in American universities, we have this traditional organization of our academic departments, but they completely organize themselves by the grand challenges, right? And it basically remixed everybody in a way that we could focus on the interesting problems of today. And, it was multidisciplinary, but we're all in the same center. So it was interesting to see. I think the thing to learn from that is when you start from scratch, you can completely rethink. So back to Obi's question, if I may reference that, I often like doing this thought experiment. What if we have a community on the moon or Mars, and we have to start designing our transportation infrastructure from there? What if we have, an institute on the moon or Mars, and we start from there and we can just reset? We'd probably organize it quite differently. So I've been amazed at that, and it really encourages me to bring diverse people together because I can see what happens when in organizations abroad.
Yeah, so my little addendum is we are pretty good a model, but we could do much, much better. And that's, I think, where Robert is trying to take us here. We can do much, much better.
Yeah. Any other question? Okay, as we kind of move here to close, I do want to give the panelists just a quick hitter. Is there, when we think about the next 10 years, is there a research imperative that institutes of your type must take the lead on? And in that, what's a non-traditional, maybe multi-sector, some partner who's not here today that's critical to make that future possible? And I know it's a long question, but I'll give you a quick hitter answers if anyone wants to take that on. I think, Dan, you were kind of outlining that a little bit, but what's a grand challenge that institutes here are uniquely capable to take on and for the future?
On the one that I...
For you, for the one that you're leading.
Yeah, the idea that, to improve accessibility, to improve it for, our population. And the reason I highlight that is because it requires so many changes for it to happen. There's changes in how transit, conventional legacy transit operators are funded and operated. It deals with automated vehicles, how they're incorporated into more of a public transportation mode. It's the infrastructure for bicycles. It's so much has to change because we've built up a model here, a system here. I mean, it started in Los Angeles, spread to Michigan, and changing that requires technology, economics, political science, sociology.
That's right. The scale, it just requires all of us.
Yeah. But the benefits are massive. I mean, just in terms of cost, how much we spend, now we spend, $10,000 per year per car, I think is the latest estimate I saw. We can do a lot better.
No, I love that. Any other panelists want to take this on? Greg?
Well, I need to slip Scott $50 a little bit later. A&M has a partnership with NASA for a Space Institute at the Johnson Space Center, where we have a lunar and a Martian simulated environment, and TTI is working on the infrastructure that will be used to make long-term human habitation in an exoplanet perspective possible. But the real benefit is, once we determine what it takes to build roadways, et cetera, in a non-aqueous environment, we're going to bring that technology back here and do what we do better on this planet. So that's where the dual-edged sword really works. But thanks for teeing that up, Scott.
Fantastic. I love it. And we're a little bit in overtime here, but Zach, you want to take on this question?
I'll bring it back down to earth, but I'll stay off the ground. I think we've tiptoed around it, but at the end of the day, this concept of advanced air mobility, I think, is a once-in-a-generational opportunity. And if you, at least for me, when I take a step back and I think about it in a broad sense, it's a lot more like surface transportation than it is traditional air travel. We're talking about direct travel between 2 points. We're talking about vertical takeoff and landing or short takeoff and landing. We just had one land on the Smart Road in 100 feet, takeoff and land in 100 feet. And yet have the efficiency of an electric turboprop, jet electric plane. And yeah, that melts my brain. So hybrid plane. It's a really spectacular technology because it uses blow and lift, so it actually creates its own lift through its propulsion. So there's these amazing technologies on the airframe side, and they're accelerating quick. And there's actually very few to no technological hurdles to getting these vehicles in the air. The challenge is this chunk of airspace between what's really low and we don't worry a lot about and where really big planes are, and it is extraordinarily under-researched. It is a very slow to evolve ecosystem with the FAA and ATC controllers. And I mean, if we go about this in the traditional way, it will be decades before we can put any meaningful amount of small vehicles up in that part of the sky. They still, by mandate, have to use voice communications. So you can forget about automation, much less scheduling an entire sky full of these kind of vehicles, and noise problems and city issues with building owners. And so it's a really fun thing to think about, Gopi, to imagine this incredible ecosystem in future, but if we don't start solving the real world challenges between here and there, then we might as well just draw that timeline way shallower than I think we ought to be shooting for.
That's great. Let me bring this to a close. We went to Mars and back, but in closing, I really do think to create that future, as we think about being here, well, there will be some people here in 60 years for the next UMTRI 120th. And the visions that are laid out, we imagine what types of people or organizations or partners will be here that aren't here now. And I just challenge all of us to start building that coalition, working with partners we don't traditionally work with, sectors we don't traditionally work with, to build that future. And I think that something we're well equipped to do. And with that, let's end the panel and thank our Institute directors for their insights. Thank you.
Well, I'm standing between you and the drinks. Thank you to our panel of the Institute directors for a candid and also forward-looking conversation from ground transportation to air mobility to Mars. It is fitting that we close the celebration of UMTRI's 60th anniversary and MCD's 10th with a view of from places that have shaped the field for decades. What I heard across today's sessions is a shared conviction that the next decade of transportation research will be judged not by how clever our models are, but by how reliable they improve the outcome on real streets. So it seems to me 3 threads that stood out. First, safety has to be demonstrated and measured in realistic and even adversarial conditions with metrics that correlate with crash risk. Second, data and models must be used responsibly privacy protected, methods explainable, benefit visible to the public. Third, translation is the hard part. Taking a validated method and turn into a system that a city can produce and can procure, a company can integrate, and a regulator can evaluate. So the goal for us as a research institution is simple and public-facing. Fewer crashes and near misses, shorter delays, and more predictable travel. So collectively, our research impact will be measured by these incomes, these metrics. So as we close day one, thank you for the energy and candor you brought to the room, and thanks to our speakers, panelists, and guests from government, industry, and academia who traveled to be here. And last but not least, I really would like to thank UMTRI and MCT staff that make this event possible. So in particular, Sue Carney, our event master and senior director of UMTRI Communication and Marketing, as well as her team, Francine Roman and Calvin Tato. So I want to thank you for your effort. To make this event possible. And so at last, please enjoy the appetizers and networking. The drinks will be on me. Travel safely, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you.